MacGyver, 1985 to 1992, captured the imagination of a generation with its thrilling plots, clever inventions, and a hero who could escape any trap with brains over brawn. But beyond the excitement and weekly adventures, the real lives of some of the show's beloved cast members were marked by sorrow, illness, and unexpected loss. Over the years, several actors from the original series have tragically passed away, some too soon, others after quiet struggles hidden from the spotlight. In this video, we honor those who helped make MacGyver a television classic and uncover the moving, sometimes heartbreaking stories behind their final days. Dana Elcar, born on October 10, 1927, took on the role of Pete Thornton in MacGyver in 1985 at the age of 58. As MacGyver's supervisor at the Phoenix Foundation, Thornton was a moral force, level-headed, strategic, and deeply loyal. Fans admired the quiet strength he brought to the role, especially when the show integrated Elcar's real-life struggle with glaucoma into the character's storyline. But behind the composed screen persona was a man weathered by years of silent personal and professional hardship. Elcar grew up in a working-class Scandinavian-American household in Michigan during the Great Depression. His father, a strict auto worker, disapproved of his interest in acting, and Dana often hid books under his mattress and rehearsed in secret. His childhood was marked by physical and emotional repression, leading to a lifetime of unresolved anger and control issues. Despite a career that spanned decades, Elcar was chronically typecast and undervalued by studios. In the 1970s, he was quietly dropped from a major project after a producer accused him, falsely, of being difficult to direct. He never fully recovered from that industry blow, and friends described years of bitterness and insomnia. Though he avoided tabloid scandals, he was known privately for fierce mood swings and obsession with perfection. Rumors persisted that he alienated several young co-stars with cutting remarks and passive-aggressive behavior. His marriage to actress Peggy Romano ended in a cold and drawn-out divorce, and his relationship with his children became strained, particularly as his blindness progressed. In his final years, he battled diabetes, partial paralysis, and depression, often confined to a wheelchair in his Ventura home. Dana Elcar died on June 6, 2005, in Ventura, California, from complications of pneumonia and diabetes at the age of 77. His estate, which included royalties from syndicated television, a modest home, and limited investments, was valued at around $2 million. Though revered by fans, Elcar's inner life was shadowed by decades of artistic frustration and emotional distance. A man who embodied resilience but struggled deeply with visibility, both literal and symbolic. John Anderson, born October 20, 1922, portrayed Harry Jackson, MacGyver's tender, stoic grandfather, in episodes spanning from 1985 to 1991, first stepping into the role at age 63. As Harry, Anderson grounded the show in emotional realism, offering quiet strength and wisdom amid the chaos of MacGyver's adventures. But the actor's real life bore little resemblance to the warmth he projected. Anderson was born in Illinois into a rigid and unforgiving family, dominated by a religious fanatic father who subjected him to verbal and physical abuse. Traumatized early, John developed a lifelong distrust of authority and was expelled from 2 boarding schools before joining the Navy at 18, using the war as a means of escape. Despite a wildly prolific acting career, over 500 credits, Anderson was haunted by professional obscurity. Bitterly resentful that he never broke into leading man status, he quietly loathed Hollywood's elite, once walking off the set of a major network series after being denied top billing. Behind the scenes, Anderson developed a reputation for being aloof and emotionally volatile. He would often lock himself in trailers, refuse rehearsal, and once reportedly threatened to sue a fellow actor for line stealing. Although never formally married, he was linked to several younger actresses during the 70s, one of whom accused him of coercive behavior, though no charges were ever filed. He struggled with untreated PTSD and chain-smoked heavily, which may have contributed to his later health issues. By the late 80s, he had become increasingly reclusive, turning down interviews and living alone in a modest Sherman Oaks apartment. John Anderson died of a heart attack on August 7, 1992, at the age of 69. His net worth at the time was approximately $1.5 million, including television royalties and small property holdings. Despite a monumental body of work, Anderson left no memoir, no personal archive, and few mourners, a forgotten titan of the small screen, burdened by a career that never gave back what he put in. Gregory Sierra was born on January 25, 1937, and portrayed Captain Diaz and MacGyver in 1985 at the age of 48. Diaz, a no-nonsense, principled officer, brought a heavy moral weight to the early episodes, embodying the complex tension between authority and righteousness. Fans admired the gravitas Sierra brought to a role that might otherwise have been forgettable. But beneath the surface, Sierra was fighting demons from a past far darker than anything he portrayed on screen. Abandoned by both parents, he was raised by a strict, emotionally distant aunt in Spanish Harlem. As a teen, he flirted with gang life, surviving violent altercations that left both physical and emotional scars. Acting became an escape, but his early career was marred by systemic racism and typecasting. One of his most humiliating career setbacks came when he was quietly removed from a Broadway production after refusing to tone down his accent, an act of defiance that saw him unofficially blacklisted by casting agents for years. Though no public scandals tainted his image, industry insiders recall his unpredictable mood swings and his reputation for being combative on set, particularly during his time on Miami Vice. His personal life was equally troubled. His marriage to a production assistant ended in a bitter divorce after allegations of infidelity and emotional cruelty. He never had children, reportedly due to a deep fear of repeating the failures of my own father. In his later years, he became reclusive following the deaths of several close friends and battled depression in silence. Sierra died on January 4, 2021, in Laguna Woods, California, from complications of stomach and liver cancer just weeks before his 84th birthday. He left behind a modest estate valued at around $2 million, including an apartment in Sherman Oaks and residuals from decades of television work. Though outwardly dignified, Sierra's life was one long fight against the ghosts of abandonment, marginalization, and the industry that never truly knew what to do with his talent. Robert Donner was born on April 27, 1931, and took on the role of Milt Bozer in MacGyver in 1987 at the age of 56. Milt was a lovable nuisance, bumbling, overconfident, and often stumbling into dangerous situations that required MacGyver's brainy rescues. His quirky antics added comic relief to the show, but Donner's real-life persona was far more erratic than audiences realized. Born in New York City and raised in Texas, Donner grew up in a fractured home with a distant father and a mother who reportedly suffered from untreated schizophrenia. He bounced between relatives as a child and learned early to use humor as a defense mechanism. Despite serving in the Navy, Donner never fully shook the scars of that instability. In Hollywood, he was a classic eccentric, brilliant but unpredictable. Co-stars on Mork and Mindy described him as intensely method to the point of alienation, staying in character as Exciter even during lunch breaks, and once locking himself in a trailer for 3 days over a script rewrite. Though never embroiled in public scandal, Donner developed a reputation for being difficult to direct, often rewriting his own lines and challenging directors. His most crushing professional blow came when he was fired last minute from a high-profile sitcom pilot in the 80s after what insiders described as a bizarre, unhinged table read that made the cast visibly uncomfortable. His personal life was no less chaotic. Donner never married and was rumored to have had volatile, short-lived relationships with both men and women, though he remained intensely private about his sexuality. His later years were marked by health problems, loneliness, and a sense of being forgotten by an industry he once brightened. On June 8, 2006, he died of a heart attack in Sherman Oaks, California, at the age of 75. His estate, estimated at $1.5 million, included modest real estate holdings and residuals from decades of film and TV work, though court records showed a significant portion went toward medical debt and a legal dispute over a disputed trust fund. He left behind no heirs, only an aging fan base, and a trove of surreal performances that reflected the unstable brilliance of a man always teetering between genius and chaos. Dick Buckus was born on December 9, 1942, and began portraying Earl Dent in MacGyver in 1990 at the age of 48. Dent was a former heavyweight boxer with fists like bricks and a soft heart buried beneath a volcanic temper. He was the physical lean to MacGyver's cerebral yang, and audiences loved the unlikely duo. Buckus, of course, was far more famous as a brutal linebacker with the Chicago Bears, often called the most feared player in NFL history. But behind the stoic toughness was a man haunted by physical pain, addiction, and deep-seated emotional trauma. Raised on Chicago's South Side by Lithuanian immigrants, Buckus grew up amid violence and poverty. His older brother died in a gang shooting when Dick was just 12, an event that left him emotionally scarred and hypervigilant. Though he stayed out of trouble, the rage that fueled his football career was born from that grief. When he transitioned into acting, many underestimated his intellect, but Buckus took the craft seriously, even studying Meisner technique. Still, his NFL-inflicted injuries, knee surgeries, chronic pain, and early signs of CTE followed him, as did a rumored addiction to painkillers in the late 80s, which he reportedly fought to keep hidden from studios. His biggest career humiliation came when he was rejected from a major sports commentary contract with ESPN after a disastrous audition. His slurred speech and memory lapses caused by years of head trauma reportedly made executives wary. In private, his marriage to his high school sweetheart Helen was marked by long separations and whispers of infidelity, particularly during his peak fame in the 70s. One of his sons briefly battled drug addiction, and the Buckus family kept it out of public view through quiet intervention and therapy. Buckus died in his sleep on October 5, 2023, from a stroke at his Malibu home, aged 80. His estate, worth approximately $10 million, included investments, royalties, and ownership of the Buckus Foundation. Despite his demons, he left behind a legacy of toughness, integrity, and a charity that continues to serve thousands, proving that even the most brutal warriors often carry the deepest wounds. Herb Edelman, born November 5, 1933, portrayed Gorman in MacGyver episodes between 1990 and 1991 at the age of 57. His character, Gorman, was rough-edged but deeply dependable, a former military man whose skepticism of MacGyver's brain-over-brawn approach eventually gave way to admiration and camaraderie. Viewers appreciated Gorman's grounded energy, especially in contrast to the often eccentric MacGyver. But Herb's off-screen reality painted a far more turbulent portrait. Raised in a cramped Brooklyn apartment by overworked Jewish immigrant parents, Herb endured a loveless childhood marked by constant yelling and emotional detachment. Ridiculed for a stutter that plagued him into adulthood, he often retreated into silence, a trait that haunted even his later years. Though his breakout came thanks to Mike Nichols, Edelman's career was repeatedly undercut by being pigeonholed as the big sad guy. He lost out on leading roles due to what producers called his heavy aura. In 1984, he was abruptly fired from a network sitcom pilot just days before filming, leading to a nervous breakdown and a brief institutional stay, a fact never publicly disclosed. His personal life was equally rocky. His marriage to soap star Louise Sorrell ended in bitter divorce amid allegations of emotional cruelty, and he never remarried. Friends reported he struggled with deep loneliness and a long-term addiction to prescription sedatives, which he initially used to manage anxiety from emphysema. Despite these battles, Edelman maintained a reputation for dark humor and biting sarcasm, which masked deeper wounds. He died on July 21, 1996, in Los Angeles at the age of 62 from complications related to emphysema. His assets included a modest Hollywood Hills bungalow, a 1973 Mercedes he refused to part with, and a small residuals portfolio. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $2 million. While not considered a superstar, Edelman's legacy lingered in the shadows of cult fandom, as a character actor who lived, and often suffered, far outside the spotlight he so deeply craved. Richard Romanis, born February 28, 1943, played the role of James Crow in MacGyver in 1985 at the age of 42. Crow was a slick-talking swindler, oozing confidence and deception, a classic manipulator who added a layer of cerebral menace to the show's rogues gallery. Viewers were captivated by Romanis' performance, charming but untrustworthy, a villain you love to hate. But behind the charisma, Romanis had a deeply troubled past. Raised in a chaotic, emotionally cold household in Pennsylvania, he often recounted being belittled by his father, a failed boxer who drank heavily and took out his frustrations on his son. Young Richard learned early to perform toughness as survival. His career took off with Mean Streets, but that success came at a price. His volatile personality alienated directors. A particularly ugly altercation with Martin Scorsese over script rewrites nearly got him blacklisted, and rumors swirl that he and Robert De Niro had a physical confrontation that ended with Romanis banned from further Scorsese projects. He was known to be abrasive with crew members, once being escorted off set after refusing direction on a TV pilot. His biggest failure came with a self-funded 1992 film that flopped so badly it forced him into temporary bankruptcy. His personal life was equally fractured. His marriage to actress Tina Romanis was plagued with infidelity, and insiders claim she once filed for divorce after discovering a hidden relationship he had with a much younger aspiring actress. They reconciled but remained distant. Later in life, Romanis withdrew from Hollywood and relocated to Volos, Greece, where he led a reclusive life as a writer. He died on December 23, 2023, in Volos at age 80 from undisclosed causes. His estate, estimated at $1 to $2 million, consisted of modest royalties, a seaside home, and small publishing rights. Despite his fiery legacy, his death passed largely unnoticed in Hollywood, a quiet end to a once-burning star. Joe Santos, born June 9, 1931, stepped into the role of Jimmy the Eraser Kindle in MacGyver in 1986 when he was 55 years old. His character, a grizzled, remorseful former mob enforcer, brought gritty gravitas to the series, winning over fans with his complex blend of menace and redemption. But Santos' own life was far more volatile than even his darkest roles. Born into poverty in Brooklyn, he lost his father at age 4 and was raised by an overwhelmed mother who worked double shifts. As a child, he was mocked for his thick accent and stutter, both of which he later trained out through acting. Despite a strong start in the Rockford Files, Santos' career floundered in the 80s due to his difficult temperament. On multiple sets, he was known for shouting matches with directors, once reportedly throwing a chair on a CBS lot during a dispute over script changes. He struggled with a gambling problem that left him in heavy debt by the late 90s, and there were whispers he borrowed money from co-stars he never repaid. His personal life was marked by devastation. His wife Maria died suddenly in 1988, and their only son reportedly became estranged after a dispute over inheritance. Friends described Santos as a haunted man in his later years, plagued by guilt and paranoia, convinced people were trying to erase his legacy. Despite occasional guest roles, he lived quietly in Santa Monica until he suffered a heart attack and died on March 18, 2016, at age 84. His net worth, estimated between $3 to $5 million, included syndication royalties and property holdings. Yet even with financial stability, his final years were spent in solitude, his once prominent Hollywood name slowly fading into obscurity. William Morgan Shepard, born August 24, 1932, took on the role of Dr. Zito in MacGyver in 1989 at the age of 57. Zito was unlike most villains on the show, calm, cerebral, and chillingly methodical, a criminal psychologist who blurred the lines between manipulation and madness. Shepard's performance was so disturbing and captivating that it became one of the most memorable antagonists of the series. In real life, Shepard was a towering figure in science fiction television and theater, but behind his regal baritone and Shakespearean gravitas was a man who lived through decades of personal and professional turbulence. Born in London to working-class parents, he clawed his way into RADA through sheer determination, battling classist rejection and a long struggle with alcoholism in his early career, a battle he never spoke of publicly but was quietly known among industry insiders. His time with the Royal Shakespeare Company was both a triumph and a curse. Though praised for his work, he burned bridges with several directors due to a temper he couldn't quite suppress, once storming off a production after accusing his co-star of theatrical fraud. In Hollywood, he was labeled difficult in casting circles, which led to long dry spells between roles. His darkest moment came in the late 70s when he suffered a breakdown following the death of his infant daughter, an event he kept hidden for years and which many believe fueled his gravitation toward darker roles. Despite this, Shepard redeemed himself as a beloved mentor to younger actors, including his son, Mark Shepard, often coaching them for auditions and warning them of the traps of fame. He was married for decades, though insiders say the relationship was strained by long separations and lingering grief. William Morgan Shepard died on January 6, 2019, in Los Angeles at the age of 86, surrounded by family. His estate, estimated between $5 to $10 million, came from decades of consistent work in theater, TV, and voice acting, as well as residuals from sci-fi franchises. Cleveland Little was born on June 1, 1939, and played Frank Colton in MacGyver in 1989 at the age of 50. Colton was a smooth-talking, street-smart bounty hunter who added levity and a layer of ethical nuance to the show's later seasons. With charm and bravado, Little's character offered a rare portrayal of a black hero who was both principled and unapologetically witty, a presence that audiences instantly loved. But behind his infectious grin was a man deeply scarred by the industry's systemic racism. Born in Chickasha, Oklahoma, and raised in a strict religious household, Little endured a turbulent upbringing shadowed by poverty and the emotional fallout of an absent father. A quiet child with a stutter, he found refuge in acting, but even after winning a Tony Award and starring in Blazing Saddles, Hollywood largely refused to write roles that matched his intellect or range. The cruel irony of his career was that despite his obvious talent, he was often offered roles that were either comic relief or racial stereotypes. One of the most painful blows came in the early 80s, when he was quietly dropped from a lead in a major network pilot after executives allegedly expressed discomfort with a black man in a romantic lead opposite a white actress. The role was rewritten, and Little was never publicly acknowledged. Though no major scandals ever made headlines, insiders described him as a man who carried heavy emotional burdens. Rumors of prescription drug use and depression circulated privately, particularly after the breakdown of a long-term relationship in the late 80s. He never married and was estranged from parts of his family. Diagnosed with colorectal cancer, he hid his illness from colleagues, continuing to work while quietly deteriorating. He died on October 22, 1992, in Sherman Oaks, California, at just 53 years old. His net worth at the time of his death was estimated between $2 to $3 million, primarily from theater royalties and syndication residuals. Michael Constantine, born May 22, 1927, stepped into MacGyver in 1985 as Inspector Jan Messick at age 58, a disciplined Eastern European lawman shaped by Cold War trauma and Old World ideals. Constantine's performance lent unexpected gravitas to the episode, blending moral ambiguity with weary dignity. In truth, Constantine had long been fighting to be seen as more than his ethnicity. Born to Greek immigrants in Reading, Pennsylvania, he grew up in a tight-knit but emotionally repressive home. His father, a steelworker, rejected Michael's dream of acting and often ridiculed him for unmanly ambitions. The emotional toll followed him through his early years on stage, where he faced constant typecasting as the foreigner. Even after winning an Emmy for Room 222, Constantine privately confessed to friends that he feared being pigeonholed forever. He battled persistent depression in the 1970s and entered therapy after a quiet mental breakdown during a failed Broadway run. Though no public scandal ever attached itself to his name, industry gossip quietly noted his refusal to work with certain casting directors and his legal fight with a producer over royalties from a canceled series. His personal life, though not publicly messy, was tinged with sorrow. His marriage to actress Juliana McCarthy dissolved in the late 1960s after rumors of infidelity and growing emotional distance. He never remarried, and though he remained close to his children, he spent most of his later years alone. Constantine's resurgence in My Big Fat Greek Wedding brought him unexpected fame late in life, but he remained deeply skeptical of Hollywood. He requested script approval, character development meetings, and once walked off set when a joke veered into cultural mockery. Michael Constantine died peacefully on August 31, 2021, in Reading, Pennsylvania, at the age of 94. At the time of his death, he owned 2 modest homes, several retirement accounts, and continued to earn royalties from Greek wedding merchandise and syndication. His net worth was estimated between $5 to $17 million, though much of it was placed in trust for his grandchildren. Walter Gotel, born March 15, 1924, played General Bernov in MacGyver in 1987 at the age of 63. His character, a calculating Soviet military leader, exuded icy command and strategic depth, fitting perfectly into the Cold War paranoia that flavored the show's later seasons. Off-screen, Gotel lived a surprisingly double life. Born in Bonn, Germany, he fled Nazi persecution with his family in the 1930s and resettled in Britain, where the trauma of displacement shaped his stoic and reserved persona. But unlike many of his peers, Gotel never surrendered entirely to the entertainment industry. While building a solid acting career, with his most iconic role as General Gogol in the James Bond franchise, he was also a shrewd businessman. Few knew that between shoots, Gotel managed interests in several engineering consulting firms and quietly acquired farmland in rural Ireland, using his acting earnings as seed capital. Though not involved in scandals, Gotel was notoriously private and dismissive of Hollywood culture, often clashing with agents who pushed him toward more commercial projects. His biggest career disappointment came in the early 80s when he was removed from a lead role in a BBC war drama due to creative disagreements. Gotel walked off set after accusing the director of trivializing the psychology of totalitarianism. Personal relationships were no simpler. His first marriage ended abruptly after rumors of infidelity, though unproven. and his second wife, an Irish artist, reportedly lived separately in Dublin for most of their marriage. Friends described him as brilliant but emotionally impenetrable, carrying the weight of his refugee past well into old age. Gotel passed away from cancer on May 5, 1997, in London at age 73. His estate, valued between $2 to $4 million, included stock holdings, British property, and the Irish farmland, now managed by distant relatives. Though never a leading man in Hollywood, he left behind a legacy of layered villains and a life marked by intellect, secrecy, and quiet power few truly understood. Tim Rosovich, born March 14, 1946, first appeared in MacGyver in 1986 as Mike Desmond at age 39, bringing a volatile intensity to a recurring role that felt like it was written directly from his own legend. Desmond, a physical and often reckless ally, personified raw strength with a hint of chaos, traits fans of Rosovich came to expect. But few knew just how blurred the line was between character and reality. Raised in Palo Alto, Rosovich's childhood was a cocktail of violence and instability. His father, a decorated World War II veteran, was an alcoholic with a brutal temper. Football became Tim's escape, but even at USC, his behavior raised eyebrows. He once bit a teammate during practice in what he later claimed was method intensity. Though he made a splash in the NFL, his locker room antics, like lighting himself on fire to psyche up the team, made him both a legend and a liability. His transition to Hollywood was marked by a series of bizarre stories. Once arrested for throwing a flaming chair off a balcony during a party, and in another instance, briefly blacklisted after allegedly headbutting a director during a stunt dispute. While never convicted of any crimes, his erratic behavior led to more stuntman gigs and acting roles, and he quietly earned the nickname Hollywood's lovable lunatic. Rosovich married only once, but the relationship was marred by turbulence and long separations. His wife filed for divorce in the 90s but later rescinded it under unclear circumstances. In his final years, Rosovich withdrew from the public eye, battling chronic respiratory issues, the long-term effects of inhaling smoke and chemicals from his early stunt days. He died on December 6, 2018, in Grass Valley, California, at age 72 from respiratory arrest. His estate included a rural property, several vintage motorcycles, and a modest collection of sports memorabilia. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $1.5 million, less than expected, with rumors of financial mismanagement by a former business partner. Lawrence Dobkin, born on September 16, 1919, played Alexander Karsov in MacGyver in 1986 at the age of 67. Karsov was a steely, high-level adversary, calculated, menacing, and emotionally impenetrable. The character echoed Dobkin's signature style, authoritative, intellectual villains layered with hidden motives. But behind the scenes, Dobkin's life was far less orderly than the characters he portrayed. Raised in a fractured Jewish immigrant household in New York, Dobkin's father abandoned the family when he was just 9, leaving his mother to raise 3 children alone during the Depression. He developed an early stutter due to emotional trauma, which he overcame through radio training, a medium that would ironically launch his career. Though widely respected, Dobkin had a turbulent professional reputation. Multiple colleagues from the radio and television industry later spoke of his demanding and icy directorial style. During his time directing Star Trek, insiders reported that he clashed repeatedly with cast members over what he deemed artistic laziness, once walking off the set mid-shoot when an actor missed a cue. Though never embroiled in scandal, his perfectionism often crossed into control. He allegedly had a blacklist of producers he refused to work with after creative disagreements. Dobkin's personal life was equally complicated. He married 3 times, each ending in emotional fallout and contested financial settlements. His only daughter became estranged from him for over a decade, citing emotional neglect and verbal outbursts. As he aged, he became increasingly reclusive, battling heart issues and deteriorating vision, while continuing voiceover work from a home studio built in his basement. Lawrence Dobkin died of heart failure on October 28, 2002, in Los Angeles at the age of 83. His estate included vintage film memorabilia, a modest Brentwood home, and decades' worth of residuals, with his net worth estimated between $1 to $3 million. Though hailed as a pioneer of mid-century broadcasting, Dobkin's brilliance came at the cost of isolation, estrangement, and a legacy quietly haunted by unhealed fractures. Thank you for watching as we reflected on the lives and legacies of the actors from MacGyver who are no longer with us. Their humor, charm, and unforgettable performances brought joy to millions and helped shape the show into a classic. While their journeys ended far too soon, their impact lives on through every scene, every laugh, and every memory they've left behind. As we honor their lives, we're reminded of how deeply television can touch our hearts. Join us next time as we look back at more stars who left us too soon, but whose stories continue to shine.